Welcome to the Neophytes of Narratology, the internet's most pretentious and pseudo-intellectual pursuit since, perhaps, Nietzsche's thus podcast Zarathustra, or Camus' renowned Vlog of Sisyphus. While lesser men aspire to stand on the shoulders of mere giants, we at the Lost Signals will accept nothing less than titans. So join us as we delve into the fundamentals of narrative nuance and critique the critics who proclaim to know the universal qualities of effective storytelling.
Hi, and welcome back to a slightly long-delayed second chapter of Hero with a Thousand Faces. I'm Jonathan Ian Manser, here with Stephen Hermosi.
Hello.
And Scott Thurlow.
We finally gave him a call back.
And today we are doing Chapter 2, The Initiation. So it starts off with The Road of Trials, which is, I summarize as, after crossing the threshold that was defined in the first chapter, interesting things happen.
They do.
And as Joseph Campbell states right away, this is the favorite part of the myth adventure. Or the favorite phase of the myth adventure.
Yeah, well, because I have my notes that, it involves labors, tests, etc., which, as he argues for, I believe, that means it allows for many possible, variations on that and many, many myths. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's basically I guess the most classic example might be the Herculean tasks. I think he might even mention that outright. Right. But there's certainly many others like it, but it entails that part of the journey, yes.
Yeah, this is the part where, you're not quite at the... You're not at the end, you're not at the beginning anymore. You're kind of going through what is making you the hero of this story, for the most part.
In the statement that it's not the destination, it's the journey that's important.
Yeah.
This is the journey.
Right, exactly.
And I thought what was really interesting was his discussion over how these generally kind of can be related to shamanistic rites back in the day. And I actually have kind of a lengthy quote I want to read.
All right.
Hit me.
In every primitive tribe, writes Dr. Geza Rohim, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, we find the medicine man in the center of society, and it is easy to show that the medicine man is either a neurotic or a psychotic, or at least that his art is based on the same mechanisms as a neurosis or a psychosis. Human groups are actuated by their group ideals, and these are always based on the infantile situation. The infancy situation is modified or inverted by the process of maturation, again modified by the necessary adjustment to reality. Yet it is there and supplies those unseen libidinal ties.
Libidinal.
Sure. Ties without which no human groups could exist. So, but it says they're saying that, I think he actually goes into examples of, after the trance by the shaman is performed, him fighting with the evil spirits to help save the tribe and whatnot, or perform a miracle. That's what is reflected in the journey part of the myth.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I have a quick note of a confrontation with our quote demons, etc. The other self or the outsider, polar opposite of ourselves, either as a group or as an individual.
And just a slight callback, I guess. This is often the part of the journey where the hero finds the supernatural gifts that he's been given helpful.
Yeah, they help him overcome the tasks or what.
And it's basically just surviving a succession of trials, somewhat being stripped of what makes him or her usually kind of impervious in the beginning or pure a lot of times. So I think this is a really important part of the journey, actually.
And what I find, I think metaphorically to your point there, it's the necessary purging. If
I think that's
a hero did not face something that was actually threatening, it wouldn't be much of a hero's journey, would it?
Right.
And it's necessary struggles for the goal to have worth. So I want to finish off with another quote, which goes, this is the final paragraph, which the ordeal is a deepening of the problem of the first threshold, and the question is still in balance. Can the ego put itself to death? How many-headed is the surrounding hydra? One head cut off, two more appear unless the right caustic is applied to the mutilated stump. The original departure into the land of trials represents only the beginning of the long and really perilous path of initiatory conquests and moments of illumination. Dragons have now been to be slain, and surprising barriers passed again and again and again. Meanwhile, there will be a multitude of preliminary victories, unretainable ecstasies, and momentary glimpses of the wonderful land.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically, he just broad-stroked every single myth that
has ever existed. Yep.
Yeah, well, like you guys said, my closing thought on this section is that, it's like the action-y part of the myth, if you will.
Yeah.
Overcoming, and also represents...
Rising action.
Yeah, and it represents the things you guys, like, metaphorically, and he points out, also represent, like, as a society / as a species, even.
So, I think we should move on to the second part now.
All right.
Which is the meeting with the goddess, or as I have summarized as Campbell's love letter to women.
Kind of.
Where she discusses the unobtainable purity of women and also the unimaginable vengeance that come with them.
Right.
In myths particularly.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, he just kind of goes into that the role that women play, especially the, in a sense, princess to be saved, and how a lot of them are virginal and dressed in white and faced with something that keeps them out, outside of society.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of anyone but a worthy individual of attaining.
Yeah,
There-
sort of. I guess, Nemo.
Well, I was going to say there is definitely that aspect of it. I guess we, or just I, should probably say that this isn't necessarily... I think there's something to be said for the swapping of generals, and in all the book, it's pretty, your standard myth generals as far as this, but I think that you could do the same exact story and have it be, the meeting with the god as far as that goes.
Gender flipping them.
Actually, I believe he specifically addresses a couple of them with a female hero with what the male version of the pure represents.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, dude.
Go ahead.
No, I just had a note here that I think it's pretty closely paraphrased what Campbell writes in the section, but woman equals earth / knowledge, and man is the quest for that very same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like that's what that figure represents in this instance, in this part of the journey, in order to come to self-revelation and continue the hero's journey.
But
Right.
there is one part I would like to read,
Okay.
which is Joseph Campbell channeling his inner beat poet
Right.
with the ultimate adventure, when all the barriers and ogres have been overcome, is commonly represented as a mystical marriage of the triumphant hero's soul with the queen goddess of the world. This is the crisis of the nadir, the zenith, or at the uttermost edge of the earth, at the central point of the cosmos, in the tabernacle of the temple, or within the darkness of the deepest chamber of the heart.
Sure.
I was actually going to mention that same phrasing when he talks about
Phrasing.
the mystical marriage of the hero with the goddess is like, an important part of this. But he also mentions things such as the dangerous mother, which is the other part of what you were saying.
Or
like
did
the vengeance.
Freud mention that?
Well, I, of
Sure.
course, have a note that Freud mentioned it first. Freud did it first, and Campbell's invoking it here again.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's all interesting. Just that juxtaposition of the hero and the goddess and, where they stand in relation to each other and how she kind of helps his quest along.
Well, as Campbell himself would say, woman is the guide to the sublime acme of sensuous adventure. By deficient eyes, she is reduced to inferior states. By the evil eye of ignorance, she is spellbound to banality and ugliness. But she is redeemed by the eyes of the understanding, the hero who can take her as she is, while undue commotion, but with kindness and assurance she requires, is potentially the king, the incarnate god of her created world.
Totally, man.
Should be on a card somewhere.
Indeed. yeah. They're going to make greeting cards with that on it. I don't know if I have too much more to say about
No,
this section.
It's about it. Like, it's not... It's
All about, he talks about how the final test is to win the heart of the goddess, or, to win the heart of your beloved, I guess, is the hero's ultimate victory, or
well, it's part of this step, I would say.
right.
Part of the whole...
But that final, that final kiss is always the big,
Sure, I
the
guess.
big closing scene. Though all the parts for that are set up in this section,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I just wanted to say that it's not too in depth, but I mean, it's that aspect of it, and I think he covers it pretty solidly there.
Yeah.
Now, the next section is interesting because it kind of departs from the traditional model of picking out like examples, which he calls women as the temptress. Now, Scott, I believe you had a quote or a summary you had for this.
No, well, I
the
do.
Mother, the
it's your mother, your sister, your wife, your mother.
yes.
That was the first one I had, but it's sort of a joking, like, funny thing I thought to myself while reading it.
Yeah.
Well, I had for my summary, Freud has the hero goddess relationship becomes the mother-father relationship.
Yeah. No, that's pretty solid too. I like it. It's funny.
In a sense, it's how that the hero and the pure goddess that he finds along his travels will overcome and become, in a sense, what they were fighting all along, which was their mother-father that came before them,
yes.
and then become them. So,
yeah, well, I guess it's like that same, the meeting with the goddess before this, and then the temptation of that same goddess, right? Is kind of the idea, like, it represents the temptation of the flesh, and those at some point have to become insubstantial, or for the hero to continue on with the quest.
So I actually, when I mentioned that he doesn't bring up a lot of examples, is because I feel that he uses this section to discuss the practical use of the hero's journey in your everyday life.
That's pretty close to what I have kind of in my notes as well. Yeah, go on.
You too can become the own hero if you find your call of adventure. And but like again, I'll read a quote out. The individual who has only to discover his own position with reference to this general human formula, and let it then assist him past his restricting walls. Who and where are his ogres? Those are the reflections of the unsolved enigmas of his own humanity. What are his ideals? Those are the symptoms of his grasp of life. And for 5 easy payments of $19.99, you too can figure out what your ogres are.
You can be a hero as well and fight ogres.
And
sure.
I guess my one last thought on this is he brings up kind of the idea of negative portrayals of women as like harlots and strumpets.
Yeah, I have a quick note about that as well.
Is a societal like manifestation versus like something that is found in every single like myth over time. It's more of like if they want to impart morality on women, a culture will.
Use that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So,
gotcha.
Any other thoughts?
No, that's pretty much it. Again, it's rather straightforward and, outlines what it does, and which is pretty much that.
Okay, so next is the atonement with the father, which is basically Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader.
Right.
Which is growing up as a person and confronting the father figure who has always, up until that point, have domination over you.
Well, I have it as, if you want to log on, I have castration complex part 2.
Absolutely true. But they also have, like, it's either the removal of the fear or idealization you have of your father to become your own man. And that's, or I suppose if you want to do the female version of what your mother represents.
Yeah.
Which I think actually you can go and look into a lot of like modern day culture, which has that like theme of the female having to overcome either the fear or idealization, or like living in the shadow of the mother.
I think a lot of this is kind of about where that fear or whatever comes from, and like I have one little short paraphrase thing here. The ogre god is divined from the hero's own mind, which is kind of makes sense as this ogre that the hero has been building up in his mind, or as like some kind of unkillable or unstoppable force, is actually not always like it's always not actually as bad as it may seem. Like the enemy that you build in your mind is much stronger than the one that exists in real life. It's
absolutely true, though.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that was one of the more interesting things that I got out of this chapter.
Yeah, I have another quote. Quickly. The problem of the hero going to meet the father is to open his soul beyond terror to such a degree that he will be ripe to understand how the sickening and insane tragedies of this vast and ruthless cosmos are completely validated in the majesty of being. The hero
I do remember that line. Yeah.
The hero transcends life with its peculiar blind spot, and for a moment rises to a glimpse of the source. He beholds the face of the father, understands, and the two are atoned.
Yeah, I just have a quick one that this one was also, I think he has a paraphrase, but I have it even quicker, that it's basically reconciliation with the father force of creation, whose opposite side, of course, is destruction, which is what he's already faced or at least battled through and had to confront.
Right. And then once you pass that test, you can reconcile with the father figure.
That's pretty much it.
Perhaps
section.
you guys can shed some light on this. I don't know why I wrote this down, but I have...
You want me to answer you?
In quotes, hero penis, question mark, exclamation point.
I have no idea why you write anything you write,
I think he made some kind of...
I think you made a Freudian
comparison, or possibly when he was talking about Freud, in comparison to a hero's penis being an important part of...
I just think you're thinking about hero dicks, really.
To be fair,
at least.
Hey,
to be fair,
who's
we're
not thinking about hero dicks all the time?
I'm not.
Me. Just you, apparently. Just you, Ace.
Listen, you guys haven't read enough Freud.
Yes.
You obviously are all the
We've
time.
read too much.
Well, I might be thinking about it, not just realizing I am. But just to make a point, we were supposed to record this like a month ago, so we're... Yeah. Anyway, on to the fifth section, which is apotheosis, which is I've summarized as love in the time of castration.
That's a really funny reference.
played.
Line. I have
played.
something quite different. It's not as funny as that, though.
Mhm.
But hold on. Well, you go on first, and then I'll go.
Well, it's really about in a sense, it's actually a very strange section, which deals with the perfection of the androgynous and how at one point we, like in myth, the idea of the division between men and women didn't exist, and that the fall is the growth of gender duality.
Right.
There's a lot of like, it's a really strange and neat section, and I think Freud would have a field day with this.
I actually really like this section a lot. After the beginning of it didn't thrill me. I remember that, but I have in here, one of my notes is apotheosis, meaning elevation to the divine. But this chapter starts off with describing the fall into duality, and then the reconstruction of, or coming out of that duality and becoming one with both genders, or like reality in itself, really.
Yeah, well, I have a quick...
That's a lot of what it talks about.
Sorry, it's the avatar of the enlightened hero person. So not hero penis, sorry, Steve-O, but hero person,
Close enough.
Thus being either gender. Close enough, sure. Go on.
So I have a quote that I think summarizes where he's going with this, I hope. This is the meaning of the image of the bisexual god. He is the mystery of the theme of initiation. We are taken from the mother, chewed into fragments, and assimilated to the world, annihilating body of the ogre, for whom all the precious forms and beings are only the courses of a feast. But then, miraculously reborn, we are more than we were. If the god is a tribal, racial, national, or sectarian archetype, we are the warriors of his cause. But if he is a lord of the universe itself, we then go forth as knowers to whom all men are brothers.
I actually have a quote from this section as well, which I thought summed it up pretty well, or summed up a lot of it pretty well, which says that the wise realize, even within this womb, that they have come from and are returning to the Father, while the very wise know that she and he are in substance one, meaning she and he meaning the father and the mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you said, I don't want to describe this section as meandering, but it contains a lot more, like, than the previous ones, at least, like, sort of thrown together. So I'll just read a couple of mine. Like, to you, what you guys just said, and a couple of things I picked out was, he points out somewhere within it that it's sort of a side note tangent of indictment on Christianity, which I thought was pretty good. Like, he points out, like, there's dogmatic disagreement within various religions, which is why that religion will fail. And he sort of praises older and what he refers to as purer religions like Buddhism, etc.
Yeah.
And this whole section basically merges the second and the fourth one that we just talked about. So that's why it's sort of like lengthier and sort of has to like encompass both of those at once and sort of tie them all together. So like you said, Steve, like the descent duality thing, like the male-female division is something like he equates it to time versus eternity, like stuff like that, like little sort of yin-yang things like that are contained in were symbolized
I believe
previously.
he talks at length, speaking of that, I believe he talks at length in this part about the yin and the yang, which, you know, is kind of like, I feel like it holds a power of fascination over a lot of people, even from kind of a young age. I remember hearing about that in high school and wanting to learn more about it, and going over stuff like that, the duality of man type of thing. And this is the section for that. Like, this is the section where he talks about that.
So, but we're missing one big point he makes throughout this, towards the end. which I describe as come together right now over Freud.
Yeah, that's really good too.
Where basically he argues that psychoanalysis, he had earlier argued that psychoanalysis was a kind of a continuation of all these traditions that had come before, like shamanistic, and now he's arguing that it really is the heir to spirituality. And as you mentioned, he does challenge a lot of like kind of modern religion, not like directly, but he kind of has his issues with them.
Yeah, exactly.
And he feels that psychoanalysis can fit the spot where I guess
a religion,
where religion
failed.
fears to tread.
Yes. He is becoming the threshold guardian for modern religions, or at least attempting to.
Yeah, you're right. He touts him again as that, and my note just says Freud again, getting old. But like, I like your
You're just not a true believer.
I don't believe in anything, man. I don't believe in isms. I just believe in me. However,
Freudisms.
yes. Well, however, given all of that, like, yes, he still mentions it, and again, as I say often when this comes up in anything we've been doing, is that I agree that it's valid to an extent. I just don't know if psychoanalysis should be like the new religion or anything like that. But I see what he's getting at, like what his point behind it is, I suppose.
Well, it's obviously Scientology.
Totally.
Battle.
It's obviously castration.
So
Xenu.
Go on.
Castration by Xenu. Awesome. So the final section for this, and the one I had the least notes about, is the ultimate boon, which reminded me quite a bit of the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Kind of, which he does mention. I don't know if he mentions it here again specifically, but
that it's not immortality, even though a lot of pursuit in myth is over immortality. That's not what's important for like what the hero is seeking. It's knowledge, and I feel that Epic of Gilgamesh actually summarizes that perfectly. With he goes out seeking immortality and instead
comes back
finds
with knowledge.
himself.
Yeah,
so
sure. I think that's right to an extent, but I guess what I want to talk about in this section is where he mentions that the boon is always scaled to the requirements of the story, right? Which I thought was really interesting. Like, you know, if you're on a completely epic story, then the ultimate boon is something completely epic. If you're on a very personal journey, then the ultimate boon is personal to you as the hero. He says something like perfect illumination will become more life, weapons, health of a loved one, etc. I think he gave a couple more examples, but it all fits specifically to what the story needs it to be, which makes sense, but this is kind of puts it into concrete terms.
Sure. Well, I, of course, put it in video games. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
I was going to segue from that I, of course, put it in video game terms that whatever reward is scaled to your level, essentially.
Right.
And the enemies you fought have scaled to you.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I mean, like you said, I think we all had like the least amount of notes just because I think it's the shortest section that just sort of like as a coda to the rest. But it's basically that. And again, yeah, it's good to point out.
I guess one other thing that I had in here in my notes is that the boon becomes a symbol for moving past individual limitation.
Right. Actually, good call, Steve. I'll have that in mind too.
And that's and I guess that's the overall point of this part of any hero's journey story, right? Is that this fills in for your growth as a character, for your hero's growth as a character, and kind of exemplifies that.
Yeah, precisely.
It's not what you want in the story or as the hero, but it's what you get what you need.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You just might find you get the boon you need.
Well, that's all I have to say about this chapter. Anyone have any thoughts?
Don't really have much. Like, it's still fine. Like, overall, I enjoyed it, and I think I got actually more into this chapter versus the first section that we did. So I'm enjoying it. So I'm looking forward to doing the next part of it, where I think he really gets going on a lot of stuff. So yeah, this one again, I don't want to say it's introductory, but again, he lays out a number of structures and patterns, goes through some examples, and we said what we said about him, and Freud appears, popping up. It's me again.
He's our antagonist.
Yeah. And if anybody out there who's watching wants some examples of this stuff, he gives 1,000 of them in this book. So feel free to pick it up and read it.
What I failed to mention this to you before, but I had a good idea, which is after we're done reading this book, because Star Wars was so influenced by The Hero With 1,000 Faces, and we have to do it for a Monster Piece anyway, I figured we can actually do a viewing of Star Wars.
We'll do crossover.
Do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Look out for that in the future.
So
I like it.
Anyway, like next month, 2 months from now, whenever we decide to do the call, we'll do the next part. But anyway, I'm Jonathan the Neomancer, here with Stephen Mosi.
Have a good night.
And Scott Thurlow.
See you next time.
This has been the Neophytes of Narratology. We hope that you've experienced an epiphany or two of the literary nature, but only metaphorically, of course.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manser. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.